On November 12, 1942, in the heart of the North African desert, where the scorching sun poured down on golden dunes and blazing rocks, a desolate scene unfolded as a witness to merciless destruction. Black plumes of smoke still rose from the wrecked British supply convoys, and the shattered vehicles lay scattered like the skeletons of a fallen army. The air was thick with the scent of burning oil and heated metal, mingling with the dry breath of the desert, making everything seem frozen in a moment of eerie stillness. Amid this scene, a small yet unusual object began to draw the attention of the German reconnaissance units. An abandoned American vehicle, more intact than the surrounding wreckage, rested as if defiantly challenging the laws of war. It stood proudly amidst devastation. The American crew had left it when their position became untenable. According to standard Wehrmacht rules, any abandoned or captured vehicle had to be destroyed or, at the very least, left behind to avoid enemy capture. But the reconnaissance commander, an officer who had endured countless brutal battles in North Africa, paused in front of the vehicle. His eyes swept across the body of the Jeep, recognizing its uniqueness at first glance. He ordered, "Bring our best mechanic here. I want to see if we can make use of this." The order spread like the desert wind, quickly reaching the motor pool sergeant, who, with 2 decades of experience, had repaired nearly every type of German vehicle from Kübelwagons to heavy military trucks. When the expert mechanic opened the hood, a new world unfolded before him. The engine was neither elaborate nor intricate. Unlike the German machines, engineered for absolute precision, it was streamlined to perfection for all battlefield conditions. Wires were color-coded, every component clearly identifiable and easy to manipulate. No special wrenches or advanced tools were required. Anyone with basic knowledge could access and maintain it. Every detail, from standard bolts to engine parts, was uniform, standardized so that every Willys MB was essentially a perfect replica of the first. The German mechanic, accustomed to the pursuit of absolute technical perfection, furrowed his brow and widened his eyes, striving to understand the philosophy behind this simplicity. He realized that in 20 years of military service, he had never seen a machine designed with a single goal: easy production, simple operation, straightforward maintenance, and durability under any battlefield condition. The Godev L134 cubic inch engine, producing 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, was not a pinnacle of power, but it represented a revolutionary idea, not to achieve perfection, but to maximize efficiency under real combat conditions. Every part was interchangeable. A mechanic who had never touched a vehicle engine could learn to disassemble and reassemble it within minutes. This seemingly simple concept was a quiet challenge to German engineering pride. While every German vehicle was a technical masterpiece, it required a skilled mechanic and specialized tools to operate and repair. The Jeep, with its deliberate simplicity, demanded nothing more than basic understanding and a bit of dexterity. The German reconnaissance officers stood behind, observing the mechanic at work with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. They had once been proud of the Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen, a light, fuel-efficient, air-cooled vehicle, but facing the soft sands of the North African desert, all those theoretical advantages proved nearly useless. The Kübelwagen was rear-wheel drive, and its complex drivetrain made it prone to getting stuck in the sand, whereas the Jeep, with a simple lever, could overcome any obstacle. The German mechanic said nothing, merely nodding at the straightforward yet effective four-wheel drive system. With just one lever, the Jeep became a four-wheel drive vehicle, a marvel compared to German vehicles, which required multiple actions and expertise. Testing it on soft sand and small dunes, the Jeep glided effortlessly, never bogging down, despite weighing over 910 pounds more than the Kübelwagen. Slowly, he came to a realization. This was not American carelessness or lack of skill, it was a completely different philosophy of production and warfare. The Jeep was not designed to be beautiful, lightweight, or to achieve peak performance on paper. It was built to survive, endure, and be operated by anyone under any conditions. Durable, reliable, and easily maintainable, this was the message the vehicle sent to every German mechanic. A harsh reminder that war was not a place for intricacy, but for practicality and mass production. over the next few hours. The mechanics tested the Jeep, traversing sand, climbing rocky hills, carrying excess loads, overturning, tilting it withstood challenges that would have defeated German vehicles. Each impact, each stretch of difficult terrain, reinforced the understanding that this was not merely a vehicle, but a product of total industrial effort, where every detail was calculated to serve modern warfare. All replaced surprise with silent admiration. Officers approached cautiously, one by one, acknowledging something they had never considered before. Germany had never built a vehicle like this. Not in quantity, not in durability, not in production philosophy. All assumptions about German technical superiority began to crumble, and a profound realization emerged. Modern warfare was a race of production capability, sustainment, and equipment. Durability. The Jeep, small and abandoned in the North African desert, was more than a vehicle. It was a teacher, a witness, a warning. In the blistering heat and endless sands, the German mechanic realized that history was about to be rewritten by machines he had thought simple, yet contained power beyond imagination. Lessons in production, design, and total warfare began at that moment from a single abandoned vehicle lying in solitude, opening the door to an understanding the Wehrmacht had never anticipated. The Jeep did not shout, nor declare its power, but every detail, every gear, every bolt spoke a language the battle-hardened Germans were beginning to comprehend. Deliberate simplicity is stronger than complexity. Durability is worth more than finesse. Production capability is true strength, and in that first moment, under the blazing North African sun, the Wehrmacht mechanics embarked on a journey of insight, a journey whose end would affect not only the war, but the future of industrial capability. From amazement and doubt to silent admiration and profound understanding. As the North African desert sun sank behind the blazing red dunes, darkness crept in, stretching the slanted shadows of abandoned vehicles and scattered corpses across the sand. In the hazy glow of twilight, the American Jeep still stood there, yet imposing, as if silently challenging every German officer gathered around it. They looked at the vehicle with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, wondering how such a tiny, simple machine could survive conditions that had crushed even the finest German vehicles. The following day, the formal testing began. The officers decided not merely to observe, but to confront reality. A motor pool team, composed of Wehrmacht engineers and the most skilled mechanics, was tasked with putting the Jeep through harsh terrains they knew would destroy any vehicle. They chose deep sand slopes, jagged rocky crevices, and arid plains where wheels frequently got stuck. Each officer carried a sense of pride. They trusted German engineering, trusted the Kubelwagen, and the prestige of a nation that had produced perfect, intricate, and complex machines. When the Jeep began gliding across the sand, surmounting slopes that a Kubelwagen could only crawl over, each man held his breath. The small but powerful vehicle moved like a creature aware of its own survival, lightly bouncing over soft sand without becoming bogged down. A strong gust blew, sending sand flying. Yet the Jeep held its course, hopping over the dunes without losing balance. An older officer, who had fought in Spain and France, exhaled quietly and admitted, "We have never seen anything like this." The Jeep's superiority extended beyond sand, excelling on rocks and mixed terrain. They drove it up steep rocky gullies, where German wheels often slipped and skidded. With its simple yet effective four-wheel drive system, a single lever allowed the wheels to automatically adjust traction, bouncing and gripping each crevice firmly. Each bump and jolt only caused a slight shudder. The vehicle suffered no damage or malfunction. The German mechanics stood watching, half astonished, half feeling their pride brutally challenged. In their minds, German technical pride was being tested. They had long been proud of the precision of their machines. Yet now, before them, a different philosophy of warfare emerged. Not finesse, but simplicity. Not complexity, but durability. Not elegance, but effectiveness. The American Jeep, with its standardized design and simple yet robust engine, challenged every assumption they had ever trusted. Every time it overcame terrain that had defeated German vehicles, their pride cracked, replaced by astonishment and a hint of fear. The officers decided to push the challenge to the limit. They loaded the Jeep with rations, ammunition, and water well beyond its standard weight. A Kübelwagen would have struggled, the engine overheating and wheels sinking in sand. Yet the Jeep glided on, bouncing, balanced, and steady. Even when a wheel failed, the driver could replace it with a spare and minus a task that would have taken hours on a Kübelwagen. These small details caused a quiet collapse of morale among the German officers. Their pride in sophisticated engineering was not necessarily a guarantee of victory in harsh battlefield reality that night. They lit a fire and stood around the Jeep, silently discussing. Each officer tried to rationalize what they had seen using German logic. It was luck, a fluke, an exception. But as testing continued over several days, each time the Jeep conquered what they thought impossible, these explanations grew flimsy. Within each officer, a silent fear grew. Perhaps the war, which they had confidently believed would be won by superior technology and experience, now faced an entirely different philosophy: mass production, practicality, and resilience. A young officer, newly enlisted but full of zeal, spoke. "If the enemy produces vehicles like this on a large scale, we have no chance. Not because they are stronger, but because they can sustain their forces, move faster, and repair easily." His words struck like lightning to the pride of the seasoned soldiers. They realized that war is not just about strength or precision, but about production capability, recovery, and continuous sustainment areas where Germany, despite its sophistication, had limitations. The next day, a new test was conducted: zigzag climbing of sandhills, where traction is often lost. The Jeep not only climbed but glided smoothly, almost anticipating every contour of the ground. German officers took turns driving, and each had to admit they had never experienced anything like it. A machine that seemed to know how to survive, responding to every command, enduring all terrain, operating continuously without complaint. During testing, a group of mechanics tried to find a weakness. They drove it across rocky gullies, crashed into boulders, tested it in high heat, and overloaded it with extreme weight. Each time, the Jeep overcame every obstacle without failure. Its durability and intentional simplicity had shattered the belief that only sophisticated machines could prevail. By the weekend, as the North African sun set, painting the sky with streaks of red and orange, the German officers gathered around the Jeep. For a long moment, no one spoke. They understood that what they witnessed was not a random stroke of luck, but a completely different philosophy of production and warfare, one that Germany had never truly faced. The Jeep, with its simplicity and resilience, posed a question the Wehrmacht could not ignore. Is technical pride alone enough to win modern total warfare? Or are practicality and mass production the real keys? The Jeep stood there in the fading desert sunset, silent but imposing. It was not a victorious machine, but a challenge to everything Germany had prided itself on. Long-held pride, faith in precision engineering, and the belief that only the finest technology wins wars, all were put to a harsh test. Around the campfire and under the desert darkness, the German officers entered an unprecedented internal dialogue, confronting the reality that modern warfare was not just a contest between machines, but a contest of philosophy, production strategy, and survival capability. And in that moment, amidst the vast desert, German pride once, a symbol of strength and confidence, began to waver. The small, simple, yet powerful American Jeep had become a symbol of challenge, heralding the days when every assumption about strength, production, and warfare would be illuminated by the harsh light of reality, where persistence, pragmatism, and resilience determined survival. The next day, as the North African desert sun had yet to illuminate every corner of the blazing red sands, the German officers, still carrying the lingering surprise and quiet unease from the previous day's challenge, decided to take another step. They no longer wanted merely to observe. Now they wanted to learn, to understand. The American Jeep, humble yet powerful in appearance, was no longer just a machine. It had become a strict teacher, instructing them in a philosophy of warfare they had never known. The German engineers began to disassemble the vehicle, examining each component, every small detail. The simple yet durable four-cylinder engine, the uncomplicated four-wheel drive system, the lightweight but strong chassis left them simultaneously astonished and perplexed. Each man handled bolts and axles, attempting to find a weakness, a point where this resilience might fail. Yet the more they dismantled, the more they realized that the Jeep's strength did not lie in any single part, but in the harmony of the entire design. Simple yet effective, flexible yet stable, easy to produce yet enduring. An elderly officer, who had served in some of the most difficult campaigns in Eastern Europe, furrowed his brow and exclaimed, "We were wrong. We thought sophistication was the advantage, but we see now that simplicity can be stronger." His words echoed like a warning drum in the minds of the others. They understood that in war, learning from the enemy is not merely about copying weapons or tactics, but about comprehending their philosophy, understanding how they think and conduct warfare. The engineers attempted to rear the Jeep under simulated combat conditions. High temperatures, fine sand infiltrating every crevice, maximum loads, and even heavy collisions with rocks and dry tree stumps. Each time the vehicle slipped or a wheel jammed, they observed, recorded, and sought ways to improve. Simple features like the way the wheels automatically adjusted traction, or how the suspension absorbed shocks became invaluable lessons. The German engineers realized that the American Jeep was not a miraculous machine, but a perfect combination of intelligent design, practicality, and mustache, PRODUCI, BILITY. Not only the engineers, but also the field officers took part in the learning process. They tested the Jeep in simulated missions, transporting ammunition, towing artillery, scouting, terrain, and even navigating mock enemy obstacles. Each time, the Jeep completed the task with efficiency far beyond expectations. The German officers, accustomed to pride in cutting-edge technology and complex vehicles, had to admit that modern warfare relied not just on strength or sophistication, but also on sustainment, mobility, and adaptability. A young officer, watching the Jeep traverse a rugged path, remarked, "They considered every detail. Nothing was overlooked. We can learn from this not to copy, but to understand how they think." His words spread quickly, creating a new wave of awareness among the German ranks. Learning from the enemy is not shameful. It is a way to survive and evolve. Over the next few days, the study became more intensive. They began comparing the Jeep to German vehicles, the Kubelwagen, Isidian Kefs 222, and even the Tiger and Panther tanks. In terms of mobility, repairability, and load capacity, the results were not always comfortable. The Jeep could overcome terrain where the Kubelwagen failed, and could be repaired faster than even the most skilled German mechanics. Each noted advantage reinforced the simple truth: simplicity can surpass sophistication, rapid repair can outweigh raw power, and flexibility may matter more than absolute force. They were learning not only about machinery but about warfare philosophy. The American Jeep, with its durability and adaptability, represented a philosophy Germany had never truly faced. Victory does not always come from the best machines, but from the ability to sustain forces, move continuously, and adapt to any conditions. German officers began discussing tactical improvements, from vehicle formations to supply chains, and even the use of lighter vehicles instead of relying solely on heavy firepower. One evening, as the campfire flickered, the officers sat around the Jeep, reflecting on deeper lessons. A middle-aged officer said, "We have learned that sometimes the most sophisticated is the weakest. The enemy teaches us that simplicity, durability, and mass producibility can prevail in total warfare." No one disagreed. They looked at the Jeep, recognizing that it was more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of modern warfare philosophy, where every small detail could mean survival. During these days of study, they also discovered another important point. The Jeep was not merely a machine, but a product of mass production. Each Jeep could be built quickly, repaired easily, and operated by inexperienced soldiers. This was a stark contrast to German vehicles complex, sophisticated, but difficult to produce, in large numbers and requiring highly skilled mechanics. Pride in engineering, once again, was challenged. In modern war, production capability and sustainment could outweigh absolute strength. On the final day of testing, the German officers embarked on a long desert journey from one base to a mock supply station. The jeep, loaded with ammunition, water, and rations, covered a distance that the Kubo wagon had to pause repeatedly to traverse. Along the way, the officers observed not only performance, but also how the vehicle responded to every pothole, every desert wind, every unexpected situation. Each time the jeep overcame an obstacle, they took note and learned, realizing that warfare is not merely a battle, but a test of mobility, adaptability, and continuous survival. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, the German officers stood silently around the jeep. They had learned much about design, tactics, the philosophy of war, and most importantly, about the enemy's way of thinking. The American jeep was not just a vehicle. It was a lesson, a reminder that modern warfare is not defined solely by power or sophistication, but by the ability to adapt, learn, and survive. And in that moment, in the final light of the desert sunset, the German officers began to understand. To win, they would not only need better weapons, but also the wisdom to learn from the enemy, to understand their philosophy, and to apply the core lessons of simplicity, durability, and mass production. The small, resilient American jeep had become a silent teacher, opening a new chapter in Germany's understanding of warfare. Pride alone was no longer enough, and learning, adaptability, and endurance determined ultimate survival. After long days struggling in the scorching sands and blazing sun of the desert, when the American jeep had become a witness to resilience and ingenuity, the German officers began to realize an obvious truth they had never seen so clearly. War is not decided solely by mechanical power or artillery might, but by the ability to adapt and learn from the enemy. Each lesson drawn from the small, seemingly simple jeep now appeared as stepping stones, guiding them toward a new strategic future where pride must yield to pragmatism and wisdom. They began compiling their notes, data, and meticulous observations from many days. The durable engine, compact drivetrain, and strong yet easily repairable chassis all became evidence that strength does not necessarily come from complexity, but from the harmony of performance, flexibility, and maintainability. German engineers, long proud of heavy vehicles and sophisticated tanks, realized for the first time that in prolonged campaigns, vehicles that were easy to produce, repair, and operate by inexperienced soldiers could achieve superior results. But the lesson went beyond mechanics. The field officers looked at the jeep and saw an entire philosophy of warfare. The jeep did more than move it, adapted to terrain, endured harsh conditions, and completed its missions regardless of difficulty. They realized that in future campaigns, Germany could no longer rely solely on heavy vehicles or traditional tactics. Flexibility, adaptability, and force sustainment were the keys to victory in modern warfare. An older officer, who had served on the Eastern Front, emphasized, "Today we see that what seems simple can change the game. We must learn, apply, and continuously improve." His words echoed like a drum, reminding everyone that victory does not come from pride, but from understanding and the ability to turn knowledge into action. Subsequent meetings became lively. Discussions on how to apply lessons from the American jeep to German tactics. They debated improving vehicle design to increase durability and flexibility, altering formations and supply systems for rapid responses to difficult terrain, and even adjusting combat tactics to rely not only on heavy strength but also on maximizing mobility and adaptability of troops and vehicles. In quiet moments, as the desert sunset painted every sand dune in red hues, the officers looked toward the horizon and saw in the jeep a symbol. Learning from the enemy was not just a tactic, but a philosophy of survival. They began to understand that every future campaign would not only challenge the enemy but also test their own capacity for self-improvement, learning from what seemed simple yet held enormous potential. This lesson quickly spread from senior officers down to the field units. In later reports, many officers wrote that the American Jeep was not just a vehicle, but a living textbook, a measure of adaptability and true strength in total warfare. Thanks to these lessons, many operational plans were adjusted. Motorized units became more flexible. Supply systems were optimized, and troops were trained not only to rely on brute force but also on creative thinking, learning ability, and rapid response in any situation. A young officer, looking at the Jeep one last time before it was sent to the technical depot, exclaimed, "We will never forget this lesson. In the future, we will fight not only with strength, but intelligently, learning from every opponent and turning weaknesses into strengths." His words planted a new belief in everyone's mind. Modern war is no longer just about great battles, but about the combination of tactics, technology, and continuous adaptability. On the day the Jeep left the desert, the German officers watched it go, no longer prideful in their advanced technology, but humble before practical power. They had learned that future victories would belong to those who observe, learn, and turn knowledge into immediate action. From that moment on, in strategic plans, vehicle design improvements, and tactical training, the lessons of the American Jeep lived on. It was not merely a motorized vehicle, but a guiding light, reminding them that every opponent, no matter how small or seemingly weak, could teach valuable lessons if observed patiently and studied with humility. In the memories of German officers who had witnessed it firsthand, the American Jeep became a symbol of awareness, the capacity to learn and improve continuously. Whenever they looked at the desert, at rough fields and impassable roads, they remembered those days when lessons from the enemy opened the door to a future where intelligence, flexibility, and the ability to learn were the most powerful weapons. The Jeep, though gone, left its mark. Strength is not always heavy power. Intelligence is not always sophistication. And victory does not always come from pride but from learning, adapting, and wisely applying knowledge. Thus, from the hot desert sands, from the scorching sun and wind blowing fine grains of sand, a lesson for the future was born, a lesson that proud German soldiers would remember for the rest of their lives. War is the art of learning from the enemy, turning knowledge into strength, and humbly acknowledging that even the smallest, seemingly weakest opponent can hold unparalleled power. When the sands of the North African desert had buried the tracks of war, and the afternoon sun dyed the trenches and abandoned vehicles red, the small but resilient American Jeep, T. Willys, MAB, was no longer just a combat vehicle. It had become a symbol of a philosophy, a lesson, a timeless legacy. The Germans who had touched it, driven it over soft sands and rocky terrain, now carried that image in their minds like a living legend that no book could ever teach them. When German units were captured and marched to U.S. camps in Texas, they saw the Jeep again in a new environment. What they had once regarded as an enemy now served as a tool for friends. In the motor pools, former German engineers and mechanics worked alongside American soldiers, repairing, maintaining, and learning. From lightweight engines and durable frames to simple wiring systems, every detail reminded them of practical power, intelligent design, and the priority of usability. Day by day, the Germans recognized a great truth. War and production were not just about advanced technology or sophistication, but about mass production, capability, consistency, and rapid adaptation to real conditions. They witnessed hundreds, even thousands, of Jeeps, Dodges, and other vehicles being operated, maintained, and deployed at a pace they had once thought impossible. They realized that quality alone could not compensate for lack of quantity, and complexity could not surpass simplicity and usability. When the war ended, many former German engineers returned home to devastation. Cities riddled with bombs, shattered economies, yet within them remained a valuable lesson knowledge forged from the Jeep, from mass production, from easy maintenance, from the philosophy of good enough to use and durable under all conditions. They began applying these principles to rebuilding their country, integrating German precision and sophistication with American-style production efficiency. Volkswagen, once the producer of the Kuba wagon for the Wehrmacht, became a symbol of transformation. They produced the Beetle, a vehicle embodying the Jeep philosophy. Simple, durable, easy to repair, and capable of mass production, yet retaining the renowned quality of German engineering. Engineers who had maintained Jeeps in POW camps became architects of the post-war industrial revolution, helping West Germany's economy rise from the ruins. From small workshops in Wolfsburg to modern assembly lines, the Jeep's legacy was evident in every vehicle, every standardized component, every simplified and efficient production process. The former German soldiers, now aged, still remembered the first day they touched a Jeep on the scorching desert sands. To them, it had been more than a vehicle. It had been a teacher, a lesson in humility and the importance of mass production in modern warfare. They recalled the days testing engines, challenging chassis, driving across harsh terrain, realizing that the Jeep's true strength lay in its design philosophy. Easy to produce, easy to repair, and resilient under all conditions. Over time, the Jeep became a global symbol not just militarily, but of intelligent design thinking, adaptability, and efficient production. The vehicle that had once forced German engineers to admit they had never seen anything like it had now become a cultural icon, a standard of durability and efficiency. In museums, each Jeep is displayed not only as a historical artifact, but as a reminder of the power of intelligent design and mass production principles that changed the course of the war and shaped post-war Europe. Thus, the GPS legacy lies not only in its steel and engine, but in the lessons the Germans who once handled it carried home. Combining sophistication with practicality, learning from failure, and prioritizing efficient production to create superior strength, the Jeep became an invisible teacher, imparting to former enemies lessons in humility, intelligence, and adaptability decisive not only in war, but in rebuilding and constructing a nation anew. Finally, when veterans gathered at commemorative events, they gazed at restored Jeeps in museums, and in their aged eyes, one could see respect and awe. This was more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of the power of production philosophy, of victory through intelligence, and of transforming failure into lessons for the future. The Jeep from the sands of North Africa to post-war German factories left a timeless legacy, not only in mechanics or military affairs, but in production thinking, strategic vision, and the art of learning from the Anemia legacy that shaped modern Germany and exerted influence across the world.